Good afternoon and welcome to the next concurrent session of the day, Hawkes Diagnostics and Mastery Learning Paths. Our presenter today is Latrice Bowman. Latrice Bowman has been an associate professor of mathematics at the University of Alaska Fairbanks for over 20 years, spending the majority of that time focused on online and distance education. If you have any questions for the presenter during the session, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and we will address them at the end of the talk. On that note, I will hand it over to our presenter.
So let me go ahead and share my screen there. Hoping you can see that. Hi, so today I wanted to talk a little bit about Hawkes Diagnostics and Canvas Mastery Paths and how we use them in our mathematics courses here at UAF. So let's go ahead and start. So for this presentation, I wanted to just give a quick introduction, cover a little bit about me and our Department of Mathematics and Statistics, some of the courses that I teach using Mastery, the general approach that we have to it. Then we'll get into the diagnostics, kind of the setup and the structure, the mastery paths in Canvas. I will talk a little bit about how we did this in other learning management systems, but we're currently using Canvas, and so I figured I'd walk through that and then give you a quick look at how this works. And I'm not sure how many people have used the diagnostics or the mastery paths, so I figured I would just assume kind of entry level here. So quick introduction. So I've been teaching undergraduate math for over 20 years. Our department, kind of why we set up some of these mastery courses was we wanted to increase the pass rates in some of the lower division courses. So things like our pre-calc and calc. We also wanted to increase retention between the courses, meaning what we were finding early on was students were taking our pre-calc classes, they would do well in them, they'd take, the 3 weeks in between semesters and tend to forget a lot of what they learned. And so they went into calculus not as prepared as we would have liked. So we wanted to somehow increase that retention of the material. UAF is kind of very spread out. We have many branch campuses, and so we offer a lot of our lower division courses through distance. Sometimes that means Zoom nowadays, but we did actually still have some courses that are paper-based distance. We do in-person and we do synchronous online. And so we wanted a little bit more consistency between the different modalities of the courses. And so this also helped with that, being able to make things a little bit more streamlined. And we also wanted to help students with some of their other academic skills. So things like being able to set up a schedule, planning ahead, some of those things that you need throughout your academic career. And so some of the mastery and the way we've set up the Canvas modules has helped students with that. Okay. Some of the courses that we are using the mastery for are, like I said, those gateway entry courses. So at our university, we have kind of 4 pre-calculus type courses and then the 2 calculus classes. So college algebra is pretty much the same everywhere. Trigonometry, I would say, is pretty much the same everywhere. Our essential precalculus is more like a college algebra without trig, but it also throws in some of the finance. This started out as like a business pre-calc course and has changed to a business social science precalculus. Pre-calc, this is kind of our engineering track precalculus. And then same thing, the essential calculus has turned into kind of the business and life science calculus class. And then our calculus 1, which is our basic engineering calculus. So for our mastery approach, we have basically different modules throughout the course, and all of them are going to look similar. We start out by introducing the material. And again, the idea here is most of these are classes that students can test into. We've had some who may be repeating the course. So we have a lot of students that not all of the material is new. So when I say introduce the material, we are looking at some short videos, usually about 5 to 10 minutes. They view these, and then we diagnose what they understood. For the students who've seen the material before, they're going to score a little higher on the diagnostic. For those who it's brand new, maybe score a little lower. We do score these pass fail, meaning you did it or you didn't do it. And then the diagnostic then gives us a kind of a path for their learning. So we give them 3 learning paths, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later. We give them additional practice. We provide self-checks in the modules, and then we have a written assignment which looks at how they can write out the math. Most of the practice and the self-checks are both in Hawkes and in Canvas. So we have some little Canvas quizzes and then the Hawkes modules. And then, like I said, the written assignments, we use GradeScope to have students turn in their written work and go through and grade that. Towards the end of the module, we ask them to show proficiency of the material. This is usually a test. They are given a set number of questions. Usually they'll go through and answer. If they hit the mastery that we're looking for, which is usually about 85%, then they are done and can move on to the next module. If they don't, then there's a chance for reassessment. So we give them, we usually require like a tutoring appointment, either with the instructor or with tutors. They can kind of review some things. We give them some more practice, and then they can try another version of the proficiency. So now I want to take a quick look at Hawkes Diagnostics. First, I want to talk a little bit about the structure. And so for those who haven't seen this in Hawkes, basically you're going to go into the assignments and pull up the web tests. Not sure why that's way down there. And then you're going to just create a new web test. And so you'll see I have some in there. We do some diagnostics. We also do some extra credit reviews that students can do. And like I said, then we also have some practice assignments for them. But you would click on Create New, and then you'll get a screen that looks something like this. I labeled these because these are some ways I found to do this. I will say that if you haven't used the Hawkes curriculum, you may want to go through that first and make sure that the problems are what you want. Create your own problems if you need to. But once you have the curriculum set, then you would just go in, you'd pick which lesson you want. Under the actions, I usually sort these because for the diagnostic, I don't want to pick all of the easy problems. And I don't want to pick all of the hard. So I try to pick mostly medium problems. And depending on what the module is covering. So for example, let's say in this case, we were doing chapter 3, then once I've sorted these by difficulty, I would pick maybe 3 or 4 problems out of the medium from section 3.1. I would pick 3 or 4 problems from 3.2, etc. for that entire chapter. And over here on the right-hand side, this is where your problems would come up once you've picked them. If everything looks good, you can save it into your Hawkes web test folder. One of the nice things about the diagnostic is when the students go to take it, if they are answering those questions correctly from that section and they hit whatever your mastery level is, then when they go to do the Hawkes assignments, the ones that they've mastered, they don't need to do anymore. They can move on to the ones where they don't know the material as well. Okay. For our web tests, we try to open them up at the beginning of the semester. All of them have set due dates. So for these diagnostics, like I said, we'll open them all at the beginning, give them a set date they have to have them done by to try and help them stay on schedule. For all of these, we give them 2 hours. Most of the students so far, I would say, are usually right around the 1 hour mark. And like I said, these are graded basically as complete or incomplete. They either did the assessment or they didn't. So we're not really looking at what score they got on this as far as their grade goes. The score is mostly just to set up their learning path. And so most of the students, if they're feeling like they understand the material, they're going to get through it pretty quick. And usually, like I said, it's about an hour. For the students who it's brand new to them, they'll look at most of the problems, they'll try a few of them, but usually around that 1 hour mark, they're going to just move on. Okay. The other settings that we have in here are under the additional settings. So that first part of it, I did box the whole thing, but the main thing I wanted to point out was the partial credit. For our courses, especially these lower division ones, we do require that students simplify all of their answers. So if they have an unsimplified answer in their written assignments or on their assessments, they do get some credit taken off. And so in the Hawkes diagnostic, we wanted to kind of mimic that. So we put that at about 50%. We display the time remaining. And again, that's just to give students kind of an idea of how long they're taking. We do have a few students who will do the entire 2 hour time limit, but most of them, like I said, right around an hour mark. For some of the earlier modules, we'll let students take the test. If they enroll late, we do give them about a 3-week window to enroll in the course after it starts. And so we do get some in that first and second module who will enroll after the due date. And then for our diagnostic, we set it at about 90. We set it high because, again, we only want them to not do those Hawkes lessons if they really understand the material. So if they're only scoring an 80, they kind of know it, but we'd like them to go through it a little bit more. Okay. So the Canvas mastery paths is where most of the work comes in. I will say before I get into this, we did this in Blackboard when we were using Blackboard a couple years ago, and the setup and the structure, it worked in there, but I will say Canvas makes it a little bit easier to set this up for the students. Okay, a couple of things you need to have before you set up your mastery paths. If you go into your settings, before you import anything into the course, you're going to want to make sure both the Learning Mastery Gradebook and the Student Learning Mastery Gradebook are on. This allows for the mastery paths in there. Okay. I would recommend having an outline. Most of this is just so that when you're setting up your mastery paths, you have an idea of where you're wanting to go with this. So here's an example of one of the outlines that I have for a module. So this is for the algebraic functions module. Some of the things everybody's going to see. So when a student gets into that module, everybody's going to see the introduction. There's going to be some notes in there that they can read through. Like I said, the videos, we do some short 5 to 10 minute videos right at the beginning, some sort of practice to get an idea of kind of the problems, and then they're all going to take the diagnostic. Okay. Again, once they've taken that diagnostic, their score then kind of breaks them off into what they're going to need to do. So for the students who are scoring very high on that diagnostic, that's indicating that they've seen this material before, or they have a really good understanding of it. Some of those sections in the pre-calc classes, students probably saw in high school, they kind of remember that stuff. And so here we would just have them finish up those missing Hawkes lessons. So again, going through the practice, learn, practice, and certify. They would do a quick self-check. We usually have one in there. Again, these are short, maybe one representative problem from each section, and then they would have their written assignment. Okay. For the students who are scoring kind of in that mid-range, and that mid-range goes kind of low because we've adjusted these over the year. We've seen some students who are in the first year we did this, these were like 70 to 84. And we saw that some of those students in the high 60s were doing just as well in the proficiencies as some of the students in the higher 70s and 80s. So we lowered the threshold on this just a little bit. But again, they would go through the missing Hawkes lessons. We would add some videos in there. These are going to be more lecture type videos. And as I'm talking about this, this would be the setup for one of the online classes. So an asynchronous online class. If we're looking at synchronous or in person, you would have your regular lecture, or you could still do the videos. If you're doing like a flipped classroom where they have some activities in class, they could do the videos at home and then come in and do some activities in class. We would still have the self-check. I would do, again, just maybe one where it's representative of the entire module, and then they would have their written assignment. Okay. For the students scoring in the lower register of grades, here we would break up the learning a little bit more. So we would look at maybe breaking this up into 2 or 3 subgroups. So for example, relations and functions, transformations and combinations, and then polynomials and rationals. So this is that third chapter. For each of those, we would have those videos and a self-check on those. For the worksheet, we broke those up. So for example, in the previous 2 groups, maybe there are 15 problems on the written worksheet or 20 problems. We would just subdivide that and make smaller worksheets for those smaller groups. And again, it just gives the students a little bit more focus on those sections, helps them, look at it, ask the questions they have on that section, and then move on. It just gives them a little bit more time through it. For all of them, once they finish the written assignment, they would have a chance to ask questions. They would get that grade back, and then they would take their proficiency. Okay. Proficiency is also mastery based. We try to have students score at least an 80% on that before moving to the next module. And so again, if they scored 80 to 100, we would say, hey, you finished this module, go on to the next one. If they're scoring in that lower one, again, we would have an appointment. This is either with a tutor or the instructor. Mostly just to kind of go over both the worksheet and their proficiency. Again, giving the student a chance to ask some questions. They would get some additional practice in there. So this is kind of that extra credit you saw in the web test. And then they would do a retake on the proficiency. Typically for our proficiency retakes, we let them have 2 additional chances. Again, these are different versions of the proficiency, but same type of content. And I would say usually it's probably around 10 to 15% of the students that need that 3rd attempt. Most of them are either getting it in the 1st or the 2nd. So there's kind of the outline for what the modules would look like. And like I said, we try to keep all of the modules running basically the same way. And so here's what it would look like in in Canvas. Obviously the Hawkes sync tool, they're not going to see, but we would have the introduction. So this module 3 algebraic functions, that would be that introduction page. Sometimes it just gives some brief information, tells them how long it's going to take to complete this module. In some cases, if we have some modules that are slightly bigger than others. So we would sometimes put some due dates in there so that they can kind of pace themselves out. Then we've got the reading and the intro videos. Again, these are kind of some written notes that the students can look at, giving them kind of an overview of each of the sections, and then the short 5 to 10-minute videos, kind of introducing the topic to them, usually with 1 or 2 quick examples, if they're small enough problems. Then we give them some information about the diagnostic. Like I said, all of our diagnostics do have set due dates, but for our asynchronous class, students can kind of move through these modules at their own pace. And so the mark is done that you see on these. The students can't progress further in the module until they've done certain things. And again, we do that for 2 reasons. One, it helps the student kind of keep track of where they are in the modules. And the other reason we do it is it kind of gives us an idea of how quickly they're moving through things. So I can actually get a report on this and see where everybody is in the class. Then they would take their diagnostic, and you'll notice over here on the right-hand side, you'll see the mastery paths, you'll see some other things listed. That's where we go ahead and set up the mastery path, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. For this class that I'm actually talking about right now, this is one we're teaching HighFlex. So what that means is we have an in-person, a synchronous online, and an asynchronous online all together. And so we have all 3 groups of students in this one class. So we do record our in-person sessions that are kind of linked through Zoom. And so the students who are asynchronous get that benefit too. They can view any of the sessions, oops, sorry about that, through that algebraic function sessions page. And they have the opportunity to join if they want to, but they're not required to. We give them some information about the lessons in Hawkes and the written assignment. Those 2, again, mark as done. It's just, again, telling them, hey, this is what you're going to be doing here. This is when it's due. We have the mark as done so that they can write that due date down. These due dates do show up on their calendar, but we tend to get, as you may know, students tend to forget some of those due dates. Okay, so then you'll see all of the Hawkes lessons and then the worksheets, and everything is put in this module. So whether a student is going to be doing that first path where they just get the 1 worksheet, or the multiple, the smaller path or the larger path where they have multiple worksheets, we kind of break up the multiple worksheets into an A and a B, or an A, B, and C. So you'll see that there. Unfortunately, I couldn't scroll on this, but I'll show you the live in a moment. We also, so as I said, there's some things we mark as done, some things they have to view. So in the module settings, we will set that up. The score at least 0, what we found on there, we wanted students to not be able to get the rest of their path until after they've done that diagnostic. And we set it up that way. The Hawkes grades come over pretty much daily, but there wasn't a way to easily prevent them from opening like the worksheet before they did the diagnostic. So they have to at least do the diagnostic before they're going to get their worksheet and which Hawkes assignments they're going to do. For students, every semester I get 2 or 3 students who forget the diagnostic due date. Okay. And so again, one of the nice things in Hawkes is you can just go through and assign the grade on those. It'll come over. And so then the module opens up for the student, just like if they went in and didn't know anything. So worst case, if they forget that due date, they're just going to get the entire module, just like they would if they were sitting in a face-to-face classroom and you were teaching in the traditional sense. From there, like I said, they'll do their written assignments. There's some practice assessments. So again, we try to give them lots of resources for practice. And again, anything that isn't graded or doesn't have a due date on it, we just put a view in there. They just have to touch the page. They don't necessarily have to read through it if they don't need it, but it's there for them. So it's just an added resource. And so here is a kind of a quick look at what the mastery path looks like. Basically, what you're going to do is you'll set up. So this is inside of the Canvas item that I'm setting up for a diagnostic. So I would set up, hey, I'm going to add this item to the module. I want to call it a test. I would link it to my Hawkes. And then under mastery paths, I would set my breakdown. We haven't found a way to add more than 3, which we haven't really felt a need for more than 3. You can just do 2 paths. So like I said, for our proficiencies, they either passed or they didn't. So we have 2 paths for that. And so we would just set this second one down here to 0. But you can set up whatever your breakup is for those scores. And then you would just add in what you want them to do. One of the things I will tell people here is you don't have to put this in any kind of order. Just find the items that you want in that path and add it in here. The order is mostly designated by this. So however you set it up in the module is how the students will go through it. So let's take a quick look at how it works. Sorry, I have to switch screens. Okay, so here's, actually, I'm going to go back for just a second. So here's what one of these modules would look like to a student. So when they first come in, everything is grayed out except for that first item. And so, like I said, we want them to kind of go through it step by step. So here you can see they can access this first one. They can see everything that is listed as view. So if there's, for example, the worksheet, they're not going to see yet. The proficiency, they're not going to see yet, even in this list. It's all grayed out as far as the Hawkes assignments go. So anything marked as done, they're not going to be able to move on until they mark it. Okay, so here is kind of a quick look, and you'll notice I'm just going to do this real quick. If I tried to move on to the next thing without marking it, it does give them kind of an error message and say, hey, you've got to go back and mark that as done before you can move on. And again, that's so if they leave Canvas and come back later, they know exactly where they've left off. Okay, so they get an intro page. There's going to be some reading and some videos. Like I said, some of these are short, some are not. And of course, all of these are, oh, there we go. We've got some short videos there, and it talks, like I said, just a quick introduction to most of the material. Again, this one, we have them marked because we want to see that they actually looked at some of this material, okay? Then they would get information about the diagnostic. The due date for the diagnostic is always there. Time to completion. We try to put that in every page of our modules. And we try to tell them to plan ahead. We tell them the score, you know, do your diagnostic one day, then start the rest of the module the next. That's not a requirement, but it does give them some pacing. We don't want them to try and overload themselves and do everything in one day. So there's notes like that throughout. And then they would go in, and I don't know if this is gonna, okay, it would give me my diagnostic. I wasn't sure if it was gonna load because I'm not actually a student in the class, but this will take them to their Hawkes and they would go in and do their diagnostic. Okay. So I'm gonna refresh here just a second. And it might let me go on to the next thing now. Okay. Let's see if I can score in there. Okay. I did want to show you the rest of the module, but I don't think it's going to work right now. Let's see if that did it. Sorry, this worked yesterday. Okay, so now it's not going to work. Okay, but what it would do is once the score is in, it would open up and show which of these I would need to complete. So for example, a student that scored 80, 85 or above on say 3.2, 3.3, those would already be grayed out. They wouldn't have to do them because they'd be done. And then any of the ones that aren't grayed out, then they would just need to complete. Okay. And then it would also show them their, let me see if it can open. I think I did one of these. Okay, maybe not. But then it would also show them the worksheet and anything else that they needed to do in the module. And of course, everything is okay. I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead. Okay, let me go back. Sorry, I thought that was going to work, but apparently not. Oops. And now I can't get my presentation. There we go. All right. So that was pretty much all I had for you. So like I said, we've used various learning management systems on this. And we've also done this outside of Hawkes. I will say Hawkes makes it very easy because the diagnostic ties into the Hawkes modules. But I will kind of stop talking and open it for questions.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. Everyone, if you have any questions at this time, please go ahead and enter those into the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom room screen, and we will take a look at those. It sounds like everything that you have set up is super organized. I just want to say kudos to you and all your hard work.
It's been a lot of team effort, I think.
Yeah. Well, it looks great. It looks great. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
If you have any questions at this time, please feel free to use that Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom room screen.
Yes, if no one has questions, I have a question for people. If they've used mastery paths before, how are you finding them? Do they work well for you, or?
That's a wonderful question. If anyone would like to share, please feel free to type in your experience in the Q&A box. We'll give it a moment because I know it can take a little bit for typing out that experience story. I guess we don't yet. I think you did a great job though, sharing the background of mastery and utilizing that in your courses and how Hawkes really makes that easy to do. Thank you so much for sharing some of those Hawkes highlights there. I certainly enjoyed it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, we definitely don't want to wrap up too early. If anyone's struggling with their questions, if you'd like to, we'll leave the Q&A box open a little bit longer. If you think of any questions, you want to drop those down in the Q&A box. I was wondering, my colleague Layla and I actually, she's here in the background as a co-moderator. We were wondering, how long have you been using this setup in particular?
So the Hawkes with Canvas, this will be the 4th semester.
Okay.
We just switched over to Canvas from Blackboard.
Mhm.
And so we were using Hawkes and Blackboard, I want to say 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, yeah. And like I said, I don't get me wrong, Blackboard's a great learning management system, but
Yeah.
Canvas is so much nicer.
I
Yeah, the
understand.
integration with Hawks and Canvas is really nice. And it's made things much easier to keep track of and just to
Yeah,
utilize with the students. So yeah.
absolutely. Especially since Canvas offers the automatic daily syncing. So
Mhm. Yep. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad
And
that's, oh,
it
go ahead.
definitely makes tracking easier too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
And take a look at the Q&A box. All right. I had it on the wrong tab there. Here we go. Okay. No questions at this time. But Layla and I have another question.
Okay.
Have you noticed that students are also finding the Canvas and Hawks combination a little easier to navigate versus before?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things they like is the fact that they can mark things and then come back to where they left off.
Yeah.
Um, it's a lot less clicks too, is what students have said.
Okay.
Like in Blackboard, you had to get the learning mastery to work correctly, they had to go into a folder, go in here, click on this, and then they'd get, whatever item they're trying to work with. And
Right.
so with Canvas, it's nice because, I can look at my module, see where I was at, just click the thing and I'm right there.
Right.
And the embedding with Hawks has made it easier too. So you saw in there that I have some load pages. In some of our classes, we fully embed it. So if we have, like I said, some students who are very remote. We have places still here where internet is not great. And
Yeah.
so having them go into Canvas, go into Canvas and click on that link is problematic. And so for those classes, we just fully embed it and they can just do it all in Canvas. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience, your expertise here with your tips and tricks that you shared in today's session. It's very informative and again, very impressive what all you've done. So we thank you for sharing that with us. Since we don't have any other questions at this time, I guess we'll just wrap up things a little bit early. I am going to just share what we have planned for the end of the day. So first of all, to all of our attendees, thank you for coming today. We hope we'll see you tomorrow as well. We have a survey that I'm going to post into the chat box so that you can share your experience with IES so far. Again, we're so glad to have you. And I lost my chat window. Here it is. Okay. So here is a survey that you can fill out. Shouldn't take too long, but we just love to hear your feedback about your experience so far. Also, for the last hour of the day, we will be doing something a little bit different for our animal lovers out there, our friends at Goat Yes, you heard that right. Goat to meeting. We're going to have a virtual tour of Sweet Farm Sanctuary to meet the rescue goats and animals under their care. Or if you prefer to stretch your mind, you can test your knowledge with the virtual teams trivia. So we have some fun activities lined up for the rest of the afternoon today. These events will begin at 5 o'clock Eastern, and I'm going to go ahead and paste into the chat the event meeting room links, as well as the conference website, just for another reference of tomorrow's complete list of concurrent sessions and their descriptions. IES 2022 will continue tomorrow, starting at 10 in the morning Eastern time with a virtual tour of the Taban Desert. I hope I pronounced that right. If you would like to get an early start and join us for a stretch at our 9:30 a.m. chair yoga session, we would love to see you there as well, just for an early start and extra activity to start out your Friday morning. More details in the full Friday schedule will be found on the conference website. Also, while accessing the conference website, don't forget to swing by the virtual exhibit hall to say hello to my colleagues on the Hawkes team. If you stick around for a quick 5-minute demonstration, you will be entered to win one of our hourly giveaways, which includes prizes such as your choice of a 6-month subscription to Audible, a 1-year subscription to Disney Plus, or a $100 Amazon gift card. Thank you again to all of our presenters, and Latrice, thank you for ending our sessions today with such an insightful time together. And thank you for all of our attendees for joining day 1 of IES 2022. We hope that we get to see you at one of our next events, and I'll go ahead and share those links in the chat now. Thanks, everybody.